So, tonight I'm doing something a little different, and I'm going to read two essays that both tie in to something that came up in the first episodes. When I was reading the book Visits from the World of Spirits, and I should say right at the top that if you've been following my episodes and you wondered if I abandoned that book, I have not. I took a break, but I'll be getting back to it soon. The reason I bring it up is because it had a whole chapter or section about the question of whether ghosts can appear wearing the same clothes that they used to wear in their regular life. And I had never thought about this question too much, but I guess if you believe in ghosts, it's a question in need of an answer. It is pretty strange to think about, because if ghosts are just departed spirits, then why would they need an outfit at all? Like, what's going on there? And what does that mean? And in my last episode, when I was reading from the magazine The Occult Review from 1906, there were two essays about that exact topic. So I guess other people have thought this topic through very thoroughly. They've done the work on this question. So I'm going to read those two essays. They are both from the Occult Review, Volume 3, Number 5, from May 1906. And these essays are a bit dry, but if you're really fascinated by the subject of ghosts, you might find them interesting. So here we go. The first one is titled Prize Essay, Ghost Clothes. And the author name is just one word in quotes. It's Taibhse. I think it's pronounced Tabes. So, Ghost Clothes by Tabes. The fact that ghosts wear clothes presents a difficulty only if we hold with Lucretius that ghosts are generated by the physical body, simulacra, films detached from it. Once we regard ghosts as products of mentality, it vanishes. Accepting this latter view, we may regard ghosts as 1. Wholly subjective apparitions, 2. Hallucinations, but veridical, caused by something outside the percipient, or 3. Having an objective existence in space. Probably all three theories are true, applying to different cases. The first calls for no discussion here. We may proceed at once to the two others. 1. In his Dreams of a Ghost Seer, Kant gives a suggestive hypothesis of ghost causation based on the hallucination theory. The soul of man belongs to two worlds, the sense world in which it exists as a personality connected with a body, and the spirit world embracing not only the souls of living beings, but all created intelligences and discarnate spirits. As a living personality, it communicates with other living beings through the sense organs and is subject to the laws of the material universe. As a spirit, it has immediate communication independently of space and sense conditions with all other spirits. But the plane of consciousness on which it acts as spirit is not that of the ordinary waking consciousness. Kant conjectures that it may be the state entered in deep sleep, nor connected with it by memory. Hence, impressions received directly as a spirit can be transmitted to the waking consciousness only by translation into the language of the latter, i.e. sense images, and only certain persons, doubtless psychics, are able thus to objectify such impressions. Substitute subliminal self for spirit, and we bring this theory up to date. I use the term subliminal to denote that profounder consciousness which seems to function independently of cerebration in deep sleep, trance, and telepathic communication, and which perhaps survives the waking consciousness. A ghost, then, is a symbol, a reflex image generated by the percipient by an impression telepathically conveyed to his subliminal self from another subliminal, generally but not necessarily discarnate. Regard a ghost as a symbol, and the clothes difficulty vanishes. For if clothes are, as Carlyle says, the visible emblem of the fact that man is a spirit and bound by invisible bonds to all men, ghost clothes become an essential part of the symbol. In civilized communities, clothes are an integral part of our conception of man. Neither waking nor in dreams do we think of anyone apart from them. A phantom who should appear unclad would disconcert us not less than a living person in the same predicament. A ghost, it follows, involves the cooperation of two spirits, percipient, incarnate, and agent, generally discarnate, and the subjective activity of the percipient may materially influence the details of the apparition. In most cases, when the agent when alive was known to the percipient, the clothes are those familiar to the latter. They are not, however, as important as the features and are not always noticed. Ghosts often appeared at half length only, and the upper part of the form is usually most distinctly seen. An instructive case is recorded in Human Personality, Volume 1, page 688, of a gentleman who, by an effort of will, appeared to a friend as a living phantasm in his ordinary attire at a time when he was actually in night clothes. Probably, had he consciously thought of the point, he would have desired to appear so clad, or the clothes may have been the percipient's contribution. The symbolic nature of ghost clothes is shown by the fact that in cases where persons who meet with violent or accidental death appear as ghosts simultaneously or soon after, the dress often, by being blood-stained, dripping, etc., indicates the manner of death. Here the details may be due to the agent who wishes to convey knowledge of his condition. The fact that in Scotland such persons are often seen in shrouds points to the joint activity of the percipient, who is doubtless influenced by local tradition in giving form to his vision. 2. The assumption, probably true in many cases, that ghosts have an objective, spatial existence leads most naturally to the hypothesis of astral matter, which, though real in the sense of occupying space, is not subject to the laws of the physical plane. Hence, ghosts can pass through doors, vanish, etc. Seers tell us that everyone has an astral body, which, in persons of certain organization, can detach itself from the physical one, whose semblance it retains, and act independently, and which survives for a longer or shorter period after death. Swedenborg, who, though a fantastic theorist, was a genuine seer, affirmed, according to Kant, that the spirit world, presumably the astral plane, was a duplicate of the material one, and had its dwellings, gardens, etc., corresponding to ours. If so, the appearance of astral clothes on an astral body need not excite surprise. The preference of ghosts for the attire worn in life calls, however, for explanation. It may be sometimes due to the activity of the percipient, for it seems probable, from the testimony of Swedenborg and other ghost seers, that the vision strikes on astral centers of perception and is by them transmitted to the ordinary sense centers, and doubtless modified in transmission by the percipient's supraliminal faculties or past experience. Otherwise, we may attribute it to the discarnate spirit's hankering after material life and its associations. The body itself is but the raiment of the soul. It may be that the spirits who haunt us are those who in life were absorbed in material interests and still long for the fleshly garment they have discarded. Persons of highly developed natures seem seldom to reappear. They do not remain long on the astral plane, and while on it, their thoughts are turned to the future rather than the past. Ghosts, however, do not always appear in the raiment of this life. Some prefer loose, flowing robes. According to the seeress of Prevorst, who had a numerous acquaintance on the other side, these were spirits of a better order, doubtless further removed from earthly memories. In the apparitions which have been recorded of eminent saints, if such may be accepted as objective, the figure, I think, has generally appeared in luminous draperies. Whatever theories we adopt, we must allow for the possibility that an apparition may not be directly caused by the spirit of the person whose form it bears. Thought is creative, and may on the astral plane generate objective forms. possibly some phantoms are astral dream forms projected by the defunct, either at the time of death or subsequently. Probably many of the ghosts which haunt localities are persistent dream forms of this nature. Finally, even if we grant material ghosts, e.g., the materializations of seances, clothes are no difficulty. Here the body is a temporary one, constructed for purposes of manifestation from the surrounding elements, and the same applies to its clothes, or semblance of such. All investigations lead to the belief that matter is less real than consciousness, and that consciousness, the more so as we transcend its ordinary states and pass to its subliminal functionings, is creative, having the power of directly affecting other consciousness, of generating sense images, and even of working changes in matter. That was the first essay. Here's the second. It's called Spirit Clothes by James H. Hyslop. That's spelled Hyslop. The query of your correspondent in the last number of the Occult Review prompts me to call his attention to my discussion of this very subject in the little book just out, Enigmas of Psychical Research, pages 269 to 271. I there briefly outline a theory of them, having once felt the difficulty which I no longer feel on that point. I have not worked out that theory in detail, nor do I feel called upon to do so as yet. I would not even insist that it is a true theory, but only that it is consistent with our known or believed views on psychic research phenomena. The question whether we shall treat the incident of clothes and apparitions seriously at all is subsequent to the question whether we shall treat the apparitions seriously as more than hallucinations of a subjective type. That, I imagine, is admitted without protest. But the assumed objection that the incident of clothes tends to prove them all hallucinations either ignores this circumstance, or it neglects to note the distinction with which the psychic researcher draws between subjective and veridical hallucinations. All apparitions, with or without clothes, will have to be treated as subjective hallucinations until their occurrence gives evidence that they are not due to chance, coincidence, or to intra-organic stimuli of some kind. The presence of clothes gives no trouble to this point of view, but if there be reason to believe that the apparition is veridical, we have to accept that fact on other grounds than the presence or absence of clothes, and the latter fact is an incident in the question, and not an objection to them. The ground for their veridical character is the relation of their occurrence regardless of their appearance to some event not known to the person experiencing the apparition. The question of clothes does not enter into this matter. We may well ask why they appear and so expect or demand an explanation of the fact, but we cannot refer to this appearance as an objection to their veridical nature without abandoning the criterion by which that veridical nature is determined, namely, the relation to an unknown event corresponding to them. The puzzle, of course, is to conceive spirits as duplicating their clothes of the previous material life, or at least this is the difficulty imagined by the objector. But whatever the difficulty, it is not an evidence of the purely subjective character of the apparition, as long as the standard of determination is some other fact. It ought to occur, therefore, to the student that a combination of subjective and objective influences, as in ordinary sense perception, may account for the result. He could then admit that the apparition is due to foreign stimulus, but its form to subjective action. This is perhaps more easily conceived and stated than proved, and I imagine that it is evidence for such a conception that is wanted. This evidence is not yet specifically producible, but there are facts which render it intelligible and in accordance with known facts. The first of these is the general fact of telepathic hallucinations. Readers of the Proceedings of the Society for Psychical Research may have remarked that many of the telepathic experiments there recorded exhibit hallucination or phantasms in the percipient of what the agent was thinking about. If A be thinking of a chair, B perceives apparently a real chair in the form of a phantasm. This is not always the case, but was frequent enough to show that sensory reaction was incident to the telepathic stimulus, or something like sensory reaction. We should also note in this connection that phantasms of the living exhibited them in certain specific clothing. Instance the man who saw his wife in a mauve dress, she being then some distance from home and found to have been wearing such a dress which he had never before seen. Now, no one had any difficulty with the clothes of a living ghost. This fact was not regarded as an objection to telepathy or the supernormal. Neither should it be regarded as an objection to the supernormal nature of apparitions of the deceased, no matter what their explanation. Moreover, it was sometimes noticeable in the telepathic experiments that the object in the mind of the agent was not represented in the mind of the percipient as in that of the agent. The percipient may get the general idea and represent it or embody it in some memory of his own, a sensory image of his own experience, the image of the agent being a sensory memory of his own. In such cases, we have an extra-organic stimulus associated with an intra-organic production with identity enough to prove the supernormal source of the effect. Precisely an analogous fact occurs in the narratives of apparitions. Some of them represent to the person appearing in the clothes which he had been known to wear, and not in the clothes he was wearing at the time, assuming the illustration to be of the living or dying. Some of them represent the apparition in the clothes worn at the time and not known by the percipient. Other circumstances not known by the percipient often attend the apparition, but we find the same difference in representation that we mark in telepathic phantasms. All cases of apparitions, therefore, of the dead, no matter whether we refer them to telepathy between the living or telepathy from the dead, can come under this general causal explanation. We may suppose the phantasm sometimes to be the effect of foreign stimulus or thought action on the memory of the percipient, and so reproducing the phantasm in that form, as in dream and deliria also. Or we may suppose that the foreign stimulus reproduces the image in the mind of the agent, as is often the case in telepathy. If we prefer, in this latter case, we might add clairvoyance to telepathy, where the real physical facts at a distance are reproduced, and telepathic hallucination would either be disregarded or its influence supplemented by clairvoyance. The clothes of apparitions then present no psychological or other difficulty to the belief in the reality of the individual surviving death. They are no objection to the theory and no evidence that they are subjective hallucinations in any or all cases. The evidence of this must be some other fact. Whether this is the true theory of them, I do not pretend to say. All that I contend for here is that the explanation conforms to all else that we have learned to accept in psychic research, and we need give ourselves no trouble upon this point. The primary question is apart from this and rests upon a wholly different set of facts. We may later find evidence that the explanation proposed is true. I do not profess to have collected it in sufficient quantity as yet. There are some phenomena tending to indicate that the personalities represented in apparitions are not always the agents in their production. One, too, in my memory, represents the apparition as changing its form to obtain recognition which it did not receive the first time. These and other related facts point to the suggestions that I have made. And that is the conclusion of that essay. Deep stuff. A lot of food for thought here. So I'll leave that for you to turn over in your mind. And we'll be back with more episodes soon. Good night.